Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, the Hand of Adonai series, and Who is Harrison Sawyer?
And I'm Alton Gansky, the author of a bunch of novels, and writing teacher, and editor, and typewriter aficionado.
I'm Molly Jo Riley, producer of the podcast, curator and author of the Unemployment Cookbook and the upcoming mystery location novel, Nola.
Did you just refer to yourself as a curator?
I did.
Of a cookbook?
Of the recipes. Curator. The recipes. I curated the recipes from 3 generations in my family.
I've never heard of someone referring to themselves as a curator for something like a recipe book. That's fantastic. That's really awesome. So
thank you. And now this is a soundbite for my next commercial.
There you go. It has been 3 weeks, so I'm going to see if I can still do this. I know we do have some new listeners that are joining us who met us up at Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference, which was a fun time. You can find us every other Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or at your convenience at aarongansky.com, or that there's a little website. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called YouTube. You want to write it down so you don't forget it. But they've got all of our casts, or most of our casts.
Aaron, don't insult them. Y'all can insult him, but I don't want him to insult you.
If you are watching us on the YouTubes, please give us a thumbs up. That really helps us out quite a bit. And please subscribe and tell your friends. Really helps us out quite a bit. And our numbers are growing. We'd like to see them continue to grow. This is a free, and I was talking with, I believe, Andy at Blue Ridge, about how he really appreciates the fact that this is free. And that's something that was kind of put on my heart early on, is that I wanted to be able to give this information out to anybody who wanted to access it, didn't want to charge them. This is a labor of love. So anything that you can do to help out just by doing the thumbs up, by telling your friends, all that kind of stuff, subscribing to our channel, checking in with aarongansky.com, buying our books if you get a chance, that's all. But of course, our first and foremost concern is getting you the best information about how to become the best fiction writer that you can possibly be. And so that's kind of our behind the curtain peek there at our mission statement for Firsts in Fiction. If you are on the chat room, you'll notice there are some links up at the top. You can click on that, share the link with your social media peeps, and ask them to join in if they are also interested in writing. We'd love to have them along so you can ask questions as we go, etc., etc., etc. So, Pops, you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say. So now you're back from that vacation time you had out there on the Eastern Seaboard, that place in North Carolina. How'd it go?
Before or after the speeding ticket?
That's a true story, but I wasn't going to be the one to say it.
I got tagged for doing 65 in a 70-mile-an-hour zone.
68, Aaron. You were this close to having a major.
It was 70, and I got pulled over for speeding because it was a construction zone.
And you passed an unmarked car.
Yeah. So other than that, it was actually really, really good. Thanks for asking, Pops. Before we delve into details, I'm curious. Molly, are you able to see Pops when he talks? Because when he pops up for me, it's just a black screen.
I can see him fine.
Okay. Well, we'll just test this. Testing 1, 2. Am I there in all my glory?
I'm blind. Oh, yeah. No, wait. It's just Al. Yeah, he's there.
Well, hopefully YouTube's getting it, because on my feed, it's just a black screen, which is very, very strange indeed. Probably my computer.
If in the chat room, can any of you see Al when he pops up?
For some, they would consider that a blessing. So.
I'm sure there's a setting somewhere.
Far, but yeah.
Check in a box that says mute Al's video. Yes. I'm sure at home everyone's trying to click that video, mute Aaron's video, but
they can see him just fine.
Yeah.
So,
great.
So I'm sorry, Al. This is personal between you and your son.
Apparently, apparently I've done something. No, Blue Ridge was great. We connected with a lot of new listeners, and some longtime listeners got to meet Andy Clapp in person. So Andy, thanks for coming
Yay!
along. Pleasure to meet you. Just really, really great guy, classy, and appreciate that. So I did a couple of classes. I did one on poetry. I did one on um, teaching creative writing, which I guess is appropriate. And one of the things that I talked about, I'll just share this very quickly, in talking about workshops, one of the things that I mentioned, the point that I made is that we are a community of writers, and that we should work and operate as a community, meaning we should work together to bring each other up. There are several workshops out there, professional workshops, that can be very intimidating, competitive, and so they'll try and tear other writers down because they view other writers as competition, and that's definitely not how we see things. It's obviously not why we're doing this podcast. We want to bring other writers up. We don't see them as competition. Anybody who's reading a book, that's a win for all of us. That's kind of how I look at it. The better writer you become, the more people love reading, the more they will buy. Really, I just want to kind of encourage that spirit of community amongst writers, not only here on the podcast, but outside of that. If you're in a writers group, or even if you're not in a writers group, if you just have friends who are writers, check in with them from time to time, see how they're doing, encourage them. And that was one of the kind of highlights for me, is being able to communicate with people, meet people, and to kind of share my heart about teaching fiction writing. So, Molly, how about you? You were going around asking the top 5 moments from the conference. Do you have a couple bright moments that you'd like to share?
My top 5 moments, or other people's top 5?
Either. Maybe other people, so we can kind of get a good feel of the conference as a whole.
The majority, everybody that I asked, I went around throughout the weekend saying, of this whole conference so far, what are your top 5 favorite moments? And the number one answer was being in a place where we were understood, where we were all writers and nobody thought we were crazy or arrogant or out of our minds. And they understood when we said, stop talking, I have to write this down. I remember being in game night in the lobby, and all of a sudden Jacqueline says, don't talk to me for 15 minutes. And she went up against the wall with her laptop and typed for 15 minutes. It's just what she had to do. So that was the best answer. But for me, it was the community, not in a networking sense, although that was really great, to make new professional leads and to have a potential agent and so forth. I got a job offer, all that fun stuff. But for me, it was really just the community of being around with a lot of people and sharing food and stories and families and hugs, like a huge family reunion. I look forward to this every year, but this year was the best one so far.
It does feel very much like a family reunion. Of course, this year there was one very important family member who was not present. I gotta say,
there were 2 family members that were not present.
And not just, they're my blood family that were not present, but definitely, I guess, Pops, I can call you maybe the patriarch of the conference. You were the director for a number of years, and Mom, and do some sign language during the worship time and all that kind of stuff. Number one question I fielded, parents, are they okay? Number one. Number two, where are they? We really miss them. Just a huge outpouring of love and support. Your presence was definitely missed, as was Mom's. And so we did miss you. It was not the same type of a conference, though it was the same type of a conference. I know that's contradictory, but a lot of the great elements were still present, but there was that, that's, I don't know, Pops, what you bring to that conference, other than just that atmosphere, that culture of love. Yeah. I was thinking respect and admiration and community and encouragement. I think that's something that you fostered early on. And yeah, you can't even count the number of writers that you have encouraged during your time as director there. And even before, just as faculty. Everybody's got a story about when they talked with you and words of wisdom that you've shared with them, no matter how wrong they were, they still, you know, those people for you. I'm teasing you, Pops.
Well, that's the thing. The older you get, the more people are able to say, "Hey, I can remember when." So that's, I guess, one of the benefits of growing older. I'm far from the patriarch. I was director for about 6 years, and I think I've been going 15 years. I filled in for somebody who wasn't able to go, and so I got an emergency call and said, "Do you mind flying across country to fill in on the fiction track?" Track being a set of courses, and so I did. I started going back. So Yvonne Lehman is the one who founded it, and she was director for like 25 years. You know, before I came along and became director for a short period of time. And then Edie's been doing a fabulous job because it's a great conference area. And the thing has, over the years, it's been now 30 years or something like that. It's been going, maybe more, probably more.
38, I think, is what they said.
Yeah, so like 38, so it's coming up on the 40. Yeah, it's been a lot of years, and so it's built a very good reputation. So good stuff. Yeah, it was odd not to be there. I was glad I didn't have to travel or get a speeding ticket or anything like that. You know, so I was happy about that because I'm tired of traveling on airplanes. But I did miss being there. It was always great being there. So.
Well, we've been instructed to write a petition and get as many signatures as possible to make sure you and Becky come back next year.
Well, have them put their signature on maybe a $5 or a $10 bill, and that would make it easier to get there, I think.
You know what? That's actually good. Rather than mailing one petition around the world and getting it lost, they can just send all their signatures in to me, and I'll just make sure that you get the signatures.
No, you missed the part about it being on a $5 or a $10 bill.
No, I got that part. I just didn't say I was going to forward those to you. I'm good at forging signatures. You get the signatures. I get the money.
All right. Enough about me. Enough about me. We got fiction to talk about.
Okay.
We've actually had quite a bit of luck of getting people to sign for Mom to come back. It's a little tougher to get signatures for you, Pops. So, but maybe if we twist a few more. I'm teasing.
No, that's pretty much it. I understand.
So, well, we do have fiction to talk about. So let's jump into that. Ask the author. It's been a while. I gotta say, I actually miss this. I miss this. I got to scratch the itch talking about fiction while I was up at Blue Ridge, but I miss being able to be here and share it with you guys. So Ask the Author comes from Craig Cook today via the interwebs, the great ethereal interwebs. He says, I've got to work with equal weight protagonists. I don't want one over the other as more quote unquote central. Whichever I start with will be given emphasis to my reader, but they're already out of their quote normal world before they team up. I think referring to the characters. The characters are already out of their normal world before they team up. So place a part where the characters have already met as the opener and do some flashbacks for their entry into the adventure. Each has their own section where they're the first person point of view. I took a couple things out of this question. First of all, super excited that somebody's writing in multiple first person perspective. Not a lot of people doing that. I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out there. It's non-traditional, and a lot of houses are going to be a little uneasy with it right off the bat. That said, there have been some, award-winning novels that have been written in that fashion. Toni Morrison wrote one, Beloved. Is it A Mercy? It's called A Mercy that does that. I've written a novel in multiple first-person perspective. So the question I think that Craig is really getting to is, which perspective do I start with? Because the one that I start with, readers have been trained that whatever point of view they're in first is typically going to be the protagonist, the one they become most empathetic with, the one that they follow throughout the course of the story, the one they most think about, etc. And I think Craig's hang up here is, which one do I start with, character A or character B? Because in Craig's mind, if I can paraphrase for him, if I can assume here, the characters are going to be somewhat equal in importance. So I think there's a couple of things that you can do. First of all, I think the big thing is just trust your reader. Your reader is a lot smarter than we give them credit for. Just if you're alternating, I would suggest maybe alternating from chapter to chapter. One chapter is first person point of view from character A, chapter 2 is first person point of view from character B. And as long as you're alternating, they'll get the sense, they'll start to understand there are multiple protagonists going through here. I will caution you, you do definitely want to include the name of the protagonist. Otherwise, the word I is going to refer to several different characters, and that's going to become very confusing. So I think the simplest thing to do is just to title each chapter with the name of the character, the prospective character. That I'm going to encourage you to do, if you adopt this approach, and it sounds like something that you're kind of locked into, make sure the narrators sound different than one another. There is no point to writing a novel in multiple first-person perspective if both or all of the characters sound the same as every other narrator. It really gets confusing, and it can actually become very frustrating for the reader. So you want to make them clear not only in name, but also in voice. And that can be a real challenge, is to really nail the voice of two different characters. It's hard enough for most writers to nail the voice of one character, let alone two. So that becomes an additional challenge. I think the alternation method is the best way to handle it, because there you're giving equal weight, as you've said, equal importance to both characters. The important thing is you're still in control. You can do this. I would avoid doing too many flashbacks. Those can be really distracting. And I don't think the reader needs a lot of flashbacks. If you just simply start with them in media res, in the middle of the action, if you will, is going to pick up on that. They're going to find out what you're saying, and they're going to follow along with you. So again, trust the readers, maybe start in the middle and alternate. That's my suggestion to you. Pops, what would you say?
Well, I really echo everything that you're saying there. But I want to hit a little bit harder that it is non-standard storytelling. It does get done, and I've seen some books done quite well that way, but they're usually done by experienced writers who have a good foothold in the publishing business. So they're already a known quantity, and their talents are already known. So they don't have that to overcome, where a newbie is competing against a bunch of other people on the slush pile. So my advice has always been, never give them a reason to say no. Now, does that mean you can't do it? You can, certainly. And you've mentioned a couple of books that have been done that way. The real key, I think, is when you hit on the fact that the voices have to be different. Now, again, we don't know what genre this is. But if this is the kind of thing where one of them is going to be the hero, someone's going to solve the problem, that's going to really be your protagonist. The other one's a supporting protagonist. But if you're trying to keep it equal all the way through, that's going to be very difficult to do. This is not unusual. This is what storytellers do. They wrestle with this problem. How do I tell the story so I don't confuse the reader, but I stay true to the plot and to my characters? And it's not always easy, and that's why not everyone can do it. That's where the art and the craft come in. So first, just be very careful about trying to do multiple points of first person point of view, which is very non-standard. If you're just using two, you're probably okay. And I would do what you said, Aaron. Just make sure that their name appears in the chapter. So you could do chapter 12, John, and then chapter 13, Mary, and that way they know. And then you can do what I call reinforcements. That's where in a conversation, somebody uses your character's name and speaking to them. You don't want to do that a lot, but just enough to reinforce in the reader's mind, this is who we're seeing. But if you have a male and a female, their language is going to be a little different, probably. The way they express themselves, the things that matter to them, whether you last saw them in the story and where they appear next. Those will be all little giveaways. You just have to make sure now that your character is clear. That is the who, the setting is clear, and that the voice is distinct, and then you can do it. But it's certainly going to take a little bit of work to do that right.
Absolutely. I like your point. It may not be the best strategy for a first-time writer. If you've got a few novels under your belt, maybe that's okay. But like you say, maybe not the best strategy to break into the market. Not to say that you can't do it. feel free to go ahead and write it. And then if you need to do some other more traditional point of view novels first, you know, and publish those before you try this one, that's okay too. There's several ways to handle it. Molly, notice in the notes that you say that you agree with me, so I definitely want to give you some airtime to agree with me publicly. So did you have anything else to add, or just I'm brilliant?
You know, what I think I meant to say was that I agree with your dad.
Okay.
And you were both so long-winded. I mean, so both explanatory about everything that I just really don't have any further response. Well, that's not true. A little response. I said I don't necessarily think that just because you start with one that the audience won't later accept the second POV as just as important. And that's how I read the question, is he's going to introduce two POVs, but one has to come first, and that's what the audience is going to latch onto. In my opinion, the flashbacks to their entry into the world would be less dramatic and would take away from the story. I say just jump right in where you need to start. I think you said that. I'll give you the credit for that, Aaron. I'm never going to hear the end of this. So just start where the story has to start. Don't put in too many flashbacks, because that's detracting and more passive than active in the story.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to give that advice, but thank you for agreeing with it. Yeah.
Whatever. Dave Fessenden is in the chat room and wants us to know he's in the chat room because it's been 6 months since he's been in the chat room.
Hi, Dave. He's my agent. Hello, Dave.
And he asked, the chat room answered, but he asked, Aaron, isn't there an old classic novel that starts out third person and in the second chapter goes to first and stays in first person all the way through? And the consensus is that was Time Machine.
Okay.
So I don't know, and I'm asking you if you are still a know-it-all 5 minutes later.
You know, that's a little different area where you mix third and first person. I remember Angie Hunt doing that, and I was reading the book, and I wasn't critical, but I was always a little comfortable that she chose to do that. But then again, she's written 100 books, so you know, she knows her way around. Over 100 now, I guess. But she would do that. It would be first person for a bit, then third person, and you have to be very, very careful with that because it will confuse the readers.
Moby Dick is that way. Yeah, Moby Dick begins in first person, and then it'll have several scenes in which Captain Ahab is speaking with his first officer behind closed doors. Male is not present. So there are some, I think, older novels. I don't know if editors were just more open to those things. I know Moby Dick really struggled when it was first published. He had a tough time getting it published, and then it didn't even sell well until after he died. So maybe that's somewhat indicative of the nature of the beast. Maybe even back then it was still kind of a taboo thing to switch from first to third. I've seen, again, alternating first person point of view. I've seen alternating third person point of view. It's much rarer to see that alternating first and third person point of view. I didn't know Angie had written a book like that. How long ago was that?
Oh, it's been a while. It's been a while, and I've seen it done other times. And you know, if the writer is a quality writer, has been around long enough, you know, got their bumps and their bruises, and they know how to handle these things, it can work. You just have to remember that your reader might be confused at first if you're not careful. So yeah, that can be done. And I always consider these somewhat experimental. Unless you're really getting and you're trying for a literary feel, then you usually get away with more with that. But then you're probably going to be dealing with a smaller house to publish it. So, you know, there's no absolutes in this business, but you do need to keep in mind this one thing, is you're taking your readers on a journey from point A to point B. And they're the ones you need to be concerned about. You want to service the story, but the story is no good unless you have readers. So you have to make sure that they can keep up with what's going on and not confuse them in the process. If you can do that and keep it clear, really there's really no holds barred. But I just caution new writers to be careful about making those kinds of decisions out the gate.
Agreed. And I don't want to belabor the point. I feel like we've gone over it fairly well, but I think there's something to be said about writing you know, what is it, 40 novels that you got under your belt, Pops, or more, and Angie Hunt, who's got 100. You learn through that process, as you've said. You're a lot more likely to fall into traps as a new writer, trying to do these non-traditional, more, I guess, as you said, maybe kind of literary or avant-garde or postmodern or whatever you want to term it, trying these different techniques. I look at Cormac McCarthy, who does not use quotation marks in his dialogue. And I've said this before, the reason he does that is because he's Cormac McCarthy. I mean, have you seen his career? Like, he does what he wants to do. It's like Toni Morrison. Why does she get to write a multi perspective novel? Because, you know, she just holds up her Pulitzer whenever somebody says you can't do that. Really? Oh, I can't do that. Okay, that's fine. Let me just polish this trophy that I have here, this you know, award, and then you can tell me what I can't do.
But you were mentioning that with Moby Dick, there was a lot of resistance to it, a lot of bad reviews and the like. And I remember one when it came into the United States, one review was Moby Dick cost 50 cents, and unfortunately, it's not worth a dime. Okay, of course, it's a classic now, and that's one reason it's done so well, is it's taught in schools with that. But it's because he kind of stretched the rules in the way he was doing things. And that's the same thing when you do these kinds of things where you're switching up. Oh, I remember, it might have been Angie again. But no, maybe it wasn't. I was reading a book where somebody was doing that kind of thing, going back and forth, but they also were changing tenses. So it wasn't just switching back and forth points of view in third person, but one was third person present, one was third person past. And it was labor to get through, because I kept thinking they were mistakes. And then I realized they were doing this on purpose. Well, you know, I finally caught up, so maybe it was me, but it made for a difficult read. So you got to keep the reader in mind.
Exactly. Anything that takes the reader out of the story is going to be bad. Anything that reminds them that they're reading rather than experiencing, I think, is bad. Anything that calls attention to the reader themselves, or to the writer themselves rather than the story, I think is going to be bad. It breaks the fictive dream. And we want to keep our readers immersed. We don't want them to remember that they're reading. We want it to be easy. So the language needs to be easily accessible. The point of view needs to be easily accessible. It doesn't mean you can't try new things. It just needs to be easily understood for the, I guess, lay reader, if that makes it sound very academic. And so just for the common reader, just for, you know, average Joe who picks up the book, they need to be able to read it and not have to roll up their sleeves to kind of get through it. That's the ultimate goal, is to create a dream that a reader can experience through story. So Craig, I hope that answers your question probably a lot more thoroughly than you ever anticipated. So what we do here, we take a 5-minute question and turn it into a 15-minute answer. So let's get to it. We've got 10 more rules to get through. If you were with us 3 weeks ago, we started our 20 rules for writing novels. Pops, this is a list that you have come up with, and I'm a sucker for rules. Thinking specifically of Dennis Johnson's 3 rules. Maybe we'll take a look at that. Liver cancer took Dennis Johnson this week, so I'm a little bit sad. I know a lot of people may not be familiar with him or his work, but I read a lot of him when I was at Antioch in my master's program. A very, very gifted writer, very talented writer. It's sad to see him go. So maybe we'll do a quick little change of plans and look at his 3 rules, or at least mention them next week. But I do want to make sure that we give ample time, Pops, to the last 10 that we did not get to last time. And so you have here number 11. What's rule number 11 here?
Well, it's number 1 on the notes now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's number 1 on the notes. Okay. I'm trying to, that's Google Docs. So
I'm getting ready to scroll down here real quick. You know, we talk about rules. I'm getting where I don't like to use that word anymore. They're really guidelines with that. But I'm trying to remember who it was that said there are 3 rules to writing a novel. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are. So these are really more along the lines of guidelines. But here'd be the first one for tonight. Characters must have a reason for being in the story. Characters must have a reason for being in the story. Not just because you like their name, They need to be there for a reason, and one of those reasons is to move the plot forward. Somehow they're either going to challenge the protagonist, help the protagonist, provide information, shed light. They've got to do something to be there. Now, having said that, I'm going to depart from the notes just a little bit here, Aaron. But having said that, remember there's different levels of characterization. You have your primary characters, your protagonist and antagonist. Then there are supporting characters, and those are major characters, just not as major as the primary protagonist, but you have supporting protagonists. And then there are other actors who help further things. So a waiter in a restaurant that really doesn't play into the plot, but they facilitate the conversation that's going on or what's happening. So there will be other characters that come along. So you need to populate your story, but the main characters need to have a purpose for being in the story. Otherwise, you should fire them.
Yeah, you can think of them as maybe extras. These people that just kind of appear on stage and they've got one line or less. They're listed as second tall man somewhere in the credits. Those types of things. But yeah, I don't think Heather would mind me sharing this story, but she had me read flash fiction piece that she had put together. And I think my comment to her at the end, and you know, of course, I love Heather and respect her, and her work is amazing. But I think my comment was, you've got 7 characters and you need 3. And the reason you only have 1,000 words, and there was a lot of names to learn, and several of them were kind of fulfilling the same purpose. And so, like you said, Pops, they're kind of taking up space. And so I think I was a little more polite when I said it. I wasn't like just like, hey, just get rid of them. But I think I said, like, you could probably accomplish everything that you need to accomplish with, half of your cast or less. Like you say, if they're not moving the story forward, you got to fire them. They've got to reveal the character of the protagonist or the antagonist. They could serve as a foil. That's another purpose they might have. They might be some sort of archetypical character that's going to move with your protagonist as they go through the story. Maybe they're a bit of a sidekick that encourages. Maybe they're the mentor role, those types of things. So you can look at archetypes for different roles that your characters may fulfill. But basically, I like kind of how you say it here, Pops. They're either part of the problem or part of the solution, or they're gone. It's that simple. Otherwise, like you say, they're a distraction. I guess that might be another reason, is to keep them in the story, as if they are a distraction. If they are a red herring, if you're writing a mystery, that might be one thing. But then they're complicating. That's kind of, again, complicating the plot. So yeah, characters need to have a reason for being in the story. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, and I want to emphasize, you don't want to go too far with that, because you do have to populate the story. From time to time, we watch Father Brown, the BBC version of Father Brown, and he's a Catholic priest, and he has what amounts to a secretary, really, somebody who helps the parish, and then there's someone else, and they're always in the story, but they don't solve the mystery. What they do, though, is they bring out his character. One is just constantly griping about something, and he's just always patient, always has a kind word. The other one is always trying to get off the track, and he's gently pulling her back. And then in all that process, they have to solve a murder mystery at the same time. So those characters keep repeating, but they're color characters. That is, they're going to bring some element of flavor, some different shade of light or something. But they hold up the Father Brown character, so we get a better picture of him than he could ever present of himself.
Well said. Well said. And again, that's kind of revealing the character, adding to it in some way. Comic relief, you can have those guys in there occasionally.
That's what Dave just said.
Yay, see, I'm not even looking at the chat room, but Dave and I are on the same page. That's why we work together. Except now I've lost my train of thought, so hooray for that.
We're going on to the next one.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's number 12, Fox?
Learn dialogue, then learn it again. And this is because one of the most difficult things for writers to learn is dialogue. And usually, you're doing it wrong if all your characters sound the same. If you can't tell them apart in their dialogue, then you need to rework that. So learn dialogue. You need to learn how to present it on the page. A lot of people get those little techniques wrong about where to put the punctuation with quotation marks and those kinds of things. So you need to learn those basics, but learn how people speak, the terms they use based on who they are, and use that. I was just thinking about a submarine movie. I can't think of the name of it now. Someone wrote me, they said, hey, they stole your idea from A Ship Possessed. They didn't, wasn't even close, but I could see where they got the idea. And anyway, this World War II submarine has to pick up survivors on a raft, and one is a woman. And she has to walk through the submarine. They bring her in through at the front part of the boat, and then she has to walk backwards. Excuse me, she doesn't walk backwards. She has to walk to the back, towards the back of the submarine. For those that don't know, a World War II submarine is divided into officers' quarters, or they sometimes call it officer country, and then and almost based on education through the boat. So up front, that's where all the officers are, and they have their college degrees. In the very back, in the engine room, are those people who probably never graduated high school. So the way they talk is different. So as she walks through the submarine, the way they refer to her changes based on their station in the submarine. And I thought, even though it got pretty vulgar, nonetheless, it was a very creative way to show how these people were different. So she starts off in the front in officer country as a woman, and then she becomes a dame, then she becomes a skirt, and then it gets progressively worse from there as she passes some of these other people, these sailors, and they begin to talk among themselves. So learn dialogue. It will develop your character more than just about anything else that you can do.
I don't want to belabor the point here. I feel like I've said that twice today.
I think
Maybe
you
I'll
have
get it
too.
3 times. Okay. Well, somebody keep track. Tess, you can keep track. Also, Tess, you're going to find out who said there are 3 rules for writing fiction, but nobody knows what they are. She's our fact finder that way.
That's so true.
Yeah, I'm actually. Has she found out who said it already?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
We've got 9 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people in the chat room tonight. So we've got double the conversation going on. It's no, she has not found it yet.
The romper room.
Okay.
Yes.
She'll find out by the end of the show, I'm sure. Somebody will. Anyhow, we're moving on. A couple things about dialogue, just to be brief. First of all, if you get a chance, please listen to our previous casts on dialogue. I just put on a swanky new search bar on the sidebar of my page. So aarongansky.com. On the sidebar, you'll see a search feature. Just type in dialogue. All our previous casts on dialogue will pop up for you. For me, a couple, you need to be read the masters, read who's really great with dialogue. I'm going to suggest Hemingway to you. I'm going to suggest Cormac McCarthy to you, even though he doesn't use quotation marks. It can be a little bit hard to follow, but once you get the sense of it, the miracle is that even though he doesn't use punctuation in the traditional ways, it's still very, very easy to follow and know who's speaking when. Especially when you read it out loud, it's sublime. Some content warnings, because Cormac McCarthy, and he's going to write about some more challenging stuff. So if you're a sensitive reader, maybe skip it, but he's great for that. My basic rule is less is more. The more dialogue you can cut, the better off you're going to be. I think that the perfect amount of dialogue is probably 30% of what you currently have. And I know that sounds drastic, and I know a lot of readers out there are probably shocked, but I love dialogue. It's great. You love good dialogue, but you know what you don't love is bad dialogue, and a lot of it. So the more you can cut, the better off you're going to be. And that's true, I would say, in 95% of cases. Pops, am I alone on that? Would you agree with that?
Well, dialogue is a form of action, and it's better to show than to tell. So the problem is, especially with new writers, is we like to put in a lot of dialogue, and then we start using dialogue to instruct the reader. Then we start using dialogue to foreshadow what's going to happen. I don't want to do that. Dialogue is an interaction between 2 or more people, and that's where you want to keep it. Now, there may be certain revelations in what they say, like if you're doing a mystery, for example, somebody may let a clue slip, but dialogue's very important, but we can overdo it, and you don't want it to do that. It's I don't know. Maybe I guess this would hold true for dialogue. Dialogue is a seasoning. It's not just the meal.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't
Food reference.
Yeah, you don't use a bowl of seasoning for your meal, but you do have to have it because we're dealing with people and people talk.
That's a really great way to say it. Different dialogue flavors the meal in a different way, flavors your read in a different way, and so you want to you want to learn to use it properly. And I think it's easy to write poorly. And so our indication is, gee, dialogue is very easy to write. Well, no, good dialogue is really hard to write. Bad dialogue is very easy. And so I think as especially new writers, when we begin to write, dialogue just comes naturally to us. I guess bad dialogue comes naturally to us. And since it's easy to put words on page, we tend to think, oh, I'm being very productive. Look, I wrote 6.5 pages of dialogue. Well, we don't need 6.5 pages of dialogue. I actually did that today. I was doing my 1,000 words today, and probably 700 of it was dialogue. And I had to go back and say, well, I don't need 700 words of dialogue. And I had to go back through and balance it again. And so even as an experienced writer, I'm still prone to that. So number 13, Pops?
Love words. Really, really love words. The words are our tools for the writer. And I have read a great deal of stuff where people just don't want to learn new words, or they don't care how they put them together. They're just all caught up in maybe just the action thing, or they're in love with the idea of being a writer. But writers, they obsess over words. They obsess over them. I've seen other people, writers, spend an hour coming up with the right combination of 3 words to get the idea across. Now, you're not going to do that all the time, but every once in a while it's going to be that important. So really, really love the words that you use, and that will make the big difference.
I completely agree. The sound of words is important. You don't have to scan your prose the way you would with poetry, but I don't think there's anything wrong with reading poetry. You want to know who loves words more than fiction writers? It's probably poets, because there's a musical quality to them. There's a rhythm, and there's a meter, and there's breath, I would say, in words. There's life in words. I don't want to oversell the point here, but if you're not consciously deliberating over some of your words, most of your words, then you're probably not doing it right. If you're just grabbing whatever comes first, and you're a naturally gifted writer, maybe you're okay, but you need to stop and slow down occasionally and say, does this sound the way I want it to sound? Does it communicate efficiently? Does it get the idea across with the proper words, as you said, not all of the words, but just 1 or 2 of the right ones? I think you've said that well. I have said it before, I'll say it again. Read more poetry. Just read it. Even if you don't like it, find somebody that you do like. Read some Robert Frost, read some Amy Nezhikuma. Amy Nez, read her. She's really good. Sylvia Plath, Elizabeth Bishop, and just get a sense for the rhythm. I know in the bargain, Pops, you mentioned here, love the right words, don't reach for words just to look smart. With the bargain, that's exactly what I did. And I came across, my prose is very pretentious. It was very, look at me, look how brilliant I am. And it was me showing off to the reader. And this may shock you, but nobody wanted to publish it. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes being talked down to, or just like a show off. And I had to go back through and really understand that the point was not to call attention to how wonderful I am. The point was to let the story tell itself, to get out of the way of the story, and words will do that for you. So
yeah, I think I've seen a lot of first-time novels. People have self-published or recently published with their first novel, and it's like that, where the words they use, even just the dialogue tags or beats, it's unnecessary. It doesn't need to be there. And I think part of that is because their mentality is, I'm self-publishing, I am going to be published, I have the freedom to express myself. But as you said over and over, both of you, use the word said or asked. Don't say, gee, he puzzled over this, or she thought bewilderingly, or something. Just cut it down and use ask and said. It makes it flow better.
A little later, we'll talk about reading, but one of the ways you know that you're really, really a writer is if you're reading and you stop because somebody has done something incredible, giving you a great paragraph or even just a clause or a phrase within a sentence, and you stop and you read it out loud. That's when you know. And I've done that. I've done that with some Dean Koontz books. I've done that with many other books where I just have to stop. And I'm not even interested in going forward until I've properly savored that magical use of words that has just the right rhythm to it, the right ring, the right tone, the right voice. It's amazing. You can't do that in every line in a book, but you can be conscious of the words you're using.
Absolutely. That's a great segue, Pops, to number 14 or number 4 on our show notes.
Analyze everything you read, which is what we were just talking about. Analyze everything you read. I'm a pathetically slow reader. And at one time I tried to change that, become a really fast reader. And then I decided I didn't want to do that. I would be slow. I had very high comprehension. That was the upside to it. But just not a fast reader. And I'm still not to this day. And I think part of it is I'm going through and just taking it all in slowly. And when I read now, fiction and nonfiction, since I do both, I analyze what the writer has done. I want to know why they did it that way. And if they have a good idea for me, I'll be happy to steal it or learn from it and use it in some of my writing, because, brilliance is brilliance. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to come from me. Someone else can be brilliant. I'm happy with that. And, just a properly told story is amazing. But you're only going to get that as if you read.
Absolutely. It's the equivalent to a musician going to a concert and watching the masters play. Chris Cornell recently passed away. It's kind of a sad story. If you, I don't know if you guys are into that type of music or not, but Soundgarden was, my wife had a thing for Chris Cornell. Like, he was the guy. And so we listened to a lot of Soundgarden and stuff and some of his other projects. So it was saddened when he was gone. But when you watch him perform, or his band Soundgarden, or any of, you choose your music, when you really watch him play as a musician and you understand what they're doing, but you're still a little perplexed, like exactly how did they pull that off, or what prompted them to think of playing these particular notes in this particular order, or why do the minor seventh diminished chord here as opposed to that type of analysis in music. When you see the good musicians doing that with other musicians and breaking down what they're doing and finding a way to perhaps emulate it or pay homage to it in some way, we should be doing the same thing as writers. We should be reading. You ever see Stephen King on camera at a Boston Red Sox game? He's got a book out and he's reading in between pitches. And I mean, if it's good enough for Stephen King, then it's good enough for us. The more words you put in your brain, the smarter you become and the better writer you become. And so find the greats, read them, find somebody you really appreciate, even if nobody else has ever heard of them, and read them and really kind of pull it apart. Take some time. Don't just read through it, read through it and enjoy it, but then also maybe read through it a second time, pull it apart, have a highlighter in your hand, have a pen to make some notes. I used to teach AP English for a number of years, and I would make them write in their books, and they would be appalled. Mr. Gansky, how dare you say I write in a book? Books are holy, sacred objects. And I said, no. They're great. We love them, but we also want to communicate, because that's what a book does. It communicates. We want to be able to communicate back with the author. And though we're not going to send the manuscript back to them, being able to interact with them on that way, writing your thoughts down, looking at them later, can be a really kind of an intimate experience in an analysis type of a way. And it makes you a better reader. And I think it makes you a better writer. So don't be afraid to do that, to kind of look academically, if you will, at some of your favorite books. It's going to make you better. Number 15, Pops.
Learn the craft, and once you've learned it all, retire, because you're done. And that's just my funny way of saying you can't learn it all. Craft is, and I've always struggled with how to explain the difference between what writing is. It is a craft and it is an art. And a craft is, and art also has a skill set involved with it. Well, you're always learning, and writing changes over time. We don't write the way Hemingway did. We don't write the way Dickens did. Our writing back then might have, I don't know, seemed thin and childish. I don't know. To us, theirs is a little, I don't know, a little thick sometimes. Not so much Hemingway.
Fitzgerald, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and Fitzgerald and some of those. But there's always more to learn. And then we don't always remember everything we've learned. So the review is always good. So learn the craft, and you're going to keep learning it. And the best way to learn it is to go back to the reading and make all these people you read, make them your mentors. You find some good ones, you read their other stuff too.
I enrolled at Antioch University to get my master's degree in writing fiction, knowing that I already had an emphasis in creative writing from Cal State San Bernardino, and I had taken a class from Brett Anthony Johnson, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about fiction. I was pretty confident about that going in. I spent the first semester learning exactly how much I didn't know about fiction. And it's a wonderful thing when you embrace the fact that you don't know it all, and you can't know it all. And in the same way that you can never know all of music, you can never know all of writing. And so, like you say, Pops, make them your mentors, do a lot of that reading and analysis. I think you should be reading craft books that have been published by people who have, novels that have also been published. Make it a habit to read a craft book every month or every other month or whatever the case may be. If you're curious as to which craft books we recommend, we do have a podcast on it. I believe it's called Books Every Writer Should Own. You can look that up. We give you a comprehensive list of suggestions. You can listen to podcasts. Writing Excuses is one that I've long liked. It's the reason that we are currently on the air. I liked Writing Excuses and wanted to do something similar. So shout out to Writing Excuses and those of you who listen. And just continue, go to writers' conferences. Whatever it is that you can do, join a writers club, whatever you can do to plug into the community of writers to learn that craft, and it's going to make you better. Number 16, because we are kind of running out of time, so we might have to move a little more quickly here.
Always ask what if. That's the next one. Always ask what if. That's the what if question for creativity. A writer's imaginations are always on around the clock. And it usually begins with a what if question. What if this happened? What if I mentioned my book about the submarine a little earlier, A Ship Possessed, and it came from a small blurb of a newspaper ad where an old submarine washed up on shore. I forget where it was, South Korea or something like that. And that prompted a what if. And the what if was, what if a World War II submarine returned, washed up on shore? But wait, what if it returned 50 years late? Then you ask another what if question. What if it returned 50 years late in the wrong ocean? What if it came back without its crew, but it did not come back alone? And that's a string of what if questions that led to the book back here that was published by Zondervan. And I did a whole bunch of books with Zondervan because of that string of what if. So learn to ask what if.
Absolutely. Lots of other ways to come up with ideas too. That was another common question that I got right after, where's your mom and dad? We miss them. We love them. Make sure you tell them that. Then it was, how do you come up with ideas? And we've done a podcast on that. What if is definitely a way to come up with ideas. I like to combining ideas, your favorite things, Harry Potter in space. What does that look like? What if, well, I mean, that's what Star Trek is. What if there was an old Western in space? That's wagon train in space, I think is what.
Right. Wagon train in stars. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got that. Twilight is, I keep saying Romeo and Juliet with fangs. Combining completely different ideas and bringing them together can often have some pretty decent products. And so that's a way to do it. Number 17,
Always ask, what is it like? And what I mean by that is part of our job is to describe setting. Part of our job is to describe emotion and those things for the reader. So once you have your what if, you know what your plot is, you're going along. But as you do a scene, you need to ask, what is it like? What is this character going to experience? Where are we? Will the readers know this? Always ask, what is it like? And you put that experience into your novels.
Hmm. Aaron's typing something.
Yeah, my next thought. Sorry, I can't type and speak. I mean, I can, but it just never works out well. What's it like? I was mentioning this in one of my classes. Live life deliberately, as Henry David Thoreau says. Experience life with all 5 of your senses, rather than just what you can hear. Those 2 that we pay most attention to. But don't neglect sight, smell, taste, and touch. Those are very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I say the smell of wet asphalt from the rain, you have a memory tied to that particular scent. You know exactly what it is, and you know exactly where you were when you first kind of experienced it. So smells can really be very powerful in that regard. And then the next question is, how do you put that into language? And so play games with you. I do this with my kids. We'll be driving along. I'll say, there's a cloud. Describe it. I think at one point Josiah said something like a line of angry clouds marched like an army across the sky, or something like that. And I was like, son, I'm going to steal that. No one's ever going to know that you did that. That was definitely me. I'm taking that. That was really good. But just live deliberately. Find ways to put life into language. Number 18.
Learn the principles of point of view and never, ever forget it. Point of view is tough for some writers to master. Point of view is seeing through the eyes of your character. If you're doing first person point of view, it's pretty much a lock. You can only see through one person's eyes. So you're not going to end up jumping heads in the middle of scenes. If you're doing third person point of view, you have to rein in that desire to try to describe what character A is thinking, and then in the next line describe what character B is thinking. Learn the principles of point of view. There's a lot of subtle point of view shifts that get by. I find in my own writing, and have to go out and eradicate them. So learn the principles of point of view.
Absolutely. I think you got it. First person seems to be the easiest for most beginning writers. I also, in the same way that I think dialogue is quote unquote easy for beginning writers, they feel like it's easy, and it's easy to do bad dialogue. I think it's also easy to do bad first person. However, a well done novel in first person perspective can just be completely sublime, just really, really rewarding. So pay attention to the differences between good
All the Harbingers are first person. Each book is a different point of view person, point of view character, but it's all first person. I love writing in first person. It's thrilling.
Yeah.
There's a certain ease to it, and you really get to know your character as well as your character's limitations. I love first person.
Yeah, I'm a third person guy. The Bargain is first person. I've got another novel that in the, as I mentioned earlier, multiple first person perspective. But I tend to default to third person. I think that's because I don't know. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I just prefer it. I have written some stories in first person that I thought were really good though. So it depends. Number 19, Pops.
Know thy formatting. There's standard formatting for manuscripts if you're going to submit them. It's a little different how we submit today. We do it electronically. In the old days, you would send off paper copy, and they would tell you what to send, exactly what that format is. In standard manuscript format, you're going to use a 12-point font. Times New Roman works the best. Everybody's used to seeing Times New Roman, and it's the standard in the industry. 12-point, 1-inch margins, double space, and indent the paragraphs. Don't put a white space between them. You indent the paragraph, each beginning paragraph. The first line of each paragraph you indent. And then also remember to do your punctuation. Now, when I write, and I do want to make this part clear, you don't have to do that when you're doing your first draft. You put it in whatever format you want. Whatever works for you, makes you sing, doesn't matter. I write in regular format, book format. That is, it looks like a book to me on my computer. And I feel more like I'm writing a book. And then when I get ready to send the manuscript in, we're working on computers. It doesn't take long to convert that to standard format. Very easy, especially if you know what you're doing, to get that turned around. And there's reasons why that format is there. They're not being sticks in the mud, but the double spacing is important. That margin is important for many reasons. So learn and remember to use the formatting, the proper formatting.
And number 20, I don't have much to add to that. You got it there. So number 20.
Never be satisfied. Strive to be great. Once you get there, get better. And F. Scott Fitzgerald made changes to The Great Gatsby all the way until it went to print. He drove his editor mad.
Really?
Yeah, he was changing it always. I think it was even at the printers, and he was asking to make a few changes
Oh, wow.
to it. And it's just beyond that. I think they're beyond the page proofs and things like that. So never ever be satisfied. For the longest time, I would not read any book I had published.
Yeah,
I think a decade and a half had passed before I read it. And the one I did read, I had to read because I was converting it. I'd been asked to convert it to a screenplay. So I had to read it again.
Which one was that?
That was, which one was it? It was, let me look up here real quick. Wasn't Tarnished Image. It was Terminal Justice. Yeah, it was Terminal Justice. It was a fairly long book, so to get it down to screenplay feature film length was tough to do. I'm better with that now because I'm converting my out of print books into self-published books, so I've gotten over that. But for the longest time, I couldn't, and the reason was I was always striving to get better. By the time I finished a book, I was a better writer than when I'd started it. And when the book comes out, and sometimes it's 6 months later or whatever it is, when it comes out, I'm already a better writer than I was when I'd finished that one. So that's the goal. So you're always finding things you wished you had done.
You hope that's the case. You hope that you've improved each day in, day out, week in, week out. Absolutely. Never be satisfied. I think that's the mark of a professional. True professionals do not stop practicing. They do not stop trying. They just continue to work harder and harder. And that's, to me, the mark of a professional. So if you want to do this for the long haul, satisfied with what you did in your last novel or the novel before that, you should always be striving to improve your craft and write the next novel. So well said, Pops. Never be satisfied. Again, not necessarily rules. These are definitely guidelines, but we like to call them rules because it's very sensational and people tend to like to react. What? How dare you say this and that? So it's very sensational. So we've got a larger chat room. Molly, have you been able to keep up? Have you've got some questions for us here?
As best I can. We've had just some great conversation going on, and because I knew it was a full chat room, I kind of interrupted you guys as I could. Yolanda Smith was in the chat room. She's not on the list right now, but she might still be listening. So
hello, Yolanda.
She threw me for a loop when I met her over there at Blue Ridge. She pretended to be me and said, "Hi, I'm Yolanda. I'm working on a mystery novel called Nola." And I said, "What the heck?" And then she started laughing, and that was it. Okay, I need you guys to not chat in the chat room right now. I'm scrolling back, and every time somebody enters a comment, it bumps me. And so now I've lost my place again. I think it was just general conversation. Al, Andy, and Jacqueline, and a bunch of other people said, "Jacqueline, stop posting." No, they said, Al, that they miss you in Blue Ridge and that you need to come back next year. General conversation about we need to have multiple clones in order to get everything done, because those of us who have regular lives, we can't write as often as we want. Ashley and I are both on a TV fast, and so we are resisting the urge to get back onto TV. Pam Jernigan just messaged me and said she's watching the podcast but can't find the chat room, so we'll have to figure that out. Tess DeGroot is currently reading Gail Carson Levine's Writing Magic. Her rules are simple. Write, read, reread, save what you write, even if it's bad or you don't like it. Jacqueline says she used to think that she was, somebody did something and now I lost it. Something about she thought it was Dave. Thank you, Dave.
I just threw Dave under the bus.
Anyway, there was something there where Jacqueline said she thought she was an amazing writer and her pen was magic until she started reading books on the writing craft and realized she was a writing infant. But she has just really excelled, especially at Blue Ridge, and I'm super proud of her. I'm super excited for what the future holds for everybody that was at Blue Ridge. That was a great experience.
Absolutely.
Okay. Ashley wants to ask a question. Let me find it here. She says, do we think, as the podcast team, do we think it is good to limit our media exposure consumption when we're really wrapped up in writing a new work and project? For instance, if it's kind of taking over your mind, passion, etc., is a good idea to be reading other works or watch TV, or should she just not?
Yeah, Pops, do you wanna handle this one while I formulate a response?
There are two types of people in the world: those who divide the world into two types and those who don't. But two lines of thought on this. There are some writers who, if they're writing a mystery, won't read another mystery at the same time. They might read other stuff, but they won't read the mystery. It depends. Some of these other media types free my imagination. I think I was at a movie and they were showing trailers, and something appeared in one of the trailers that gave me an idea for use in the last Harbinger book, Endgame. It wasn't the same. I didn't use the same thing, but it triggered a thought. So sometimes it's a very good thing to do. You just have to learn how your brain is wired. If you find it interfering, stop. If you find it freeing, keep going.
I would agree with that. I tend to be a media consumer, not as heavy as other people. I like movies. I'll go see some of the big blockbusters when they come out. Take the family. It's good family time. I don't find that to be too big of an interference with my production and my writing. I don't find it to interfere too much. If you're writing something and you feel that it's become too derivative of your favorite television program, maybe you step back from that TV program for a little bit. Maybe you just kind of binge watch it on Netflix later, whatever the case may be. But only if you find that it's being too derivative. I think if you watch widely and read widely, again, read some poetry. Analyze lyrics in songs. Read nonfiction. Read fiction. Read the newspaper. Read journalism. Read newspapers and magazines. Whatever it is, if you read widely and consume widely, I don't think that your work is going to become too derivative. What I do notice is that people who only read in a particular genre or only watch in a particular genre, their work does tend to be more derivative because their breadth of experience is limited in scope, very limited. And so it's harder for them to mix and match and find different unique ideas and twist what is, twist the conventions, the normal tropes. For me, if I'm reading a fantasy, I want to know that it's going to be different than The Lord of the Rings. If I'm reading a sci-fi, I want to know that it's not going to be necessarily Rendezvous with Roma. As much as I love that book, I already read it. I don't need to read it again. I want to see different characters. I want to see different tropes. I want to see the interplay of different tropes. So I would say perhaps it's not that you are over consuming. It might be that you're over consuming in one particular genre, and perhaps to widen your perspective. I will say that sometimes I get pulled into Magic the Gathering. You guys know that
No. Don't even say it like you get pulled into it. Like you don't initiate the game at almost every chance you get.
So here's the thing. I recently just sold my cards, and I know that's going to make a lot of people sad when they find out. But there would be times where it's like, oh, I would get this idea in my head of, oh, I want to build this new deck, and then all of a sudden that's taking the focus of my attention, and my writing time is now I'm playing with my Magic cards. That's bad. Then yes, put those away. If it's interfering with your writing time, get rid of it. Otherwise, perhaps widen your perspectives and consume more. I think that's my suggestion there. I just noticed that Ashley said she wants to play Magic the Gathering. Get it on the Xbox or something. Don't buy the cards, because otherwise you lose all your money and it really becomes consuming. So, but it is a fun game. Anyhow, moving on. Anything else, Molly, or did we get it all?
Yes. Well, Sophia Hansen is a new name into the chat room, and she's in here tonight.
Sophia.
She said that she loves this line from the Book of Things to Come. Yesterday they were our enemy. Today they are our people. She said that's a beautiful line.
Wow, who wrote that book?
Some nobody, really. I don't know. Al and I diss it every chance we get. It's just not anything that we really want to pay attention to. That's the book we hold up to what not to be like.
Oh, okay. All right. Book of Things Not to.
I'm kidding. It was Aaron, and it was a good book.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Good. Anything else? We good?
Everybody is saying good answers. Thank you so much. The rest was chat talking about food. It's Taco Tuesday, so thank you for reminding us of that, Andy. And just everybody doing quotes. That is about it. That is all I can find. So if I've missed anything, folks, I'm sorry. It's been over an hour of chat and questions from 8 different people, and it was a lot of fun. So if I missed anything, I apologize.
I think you've done an excellent job. So that brings us to the end of our cast. We are a little bit over on time, but that's what you get for taking an extra week off. In 2 more weeks, Tuesday, July 13th, we will be back, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget, you can ask the author at aarongansky.com. You can do it on our First in Fiction Facebook page, or just Facebook me, or Twitter. Any of your social media. I recently joined Instagram. I guess that's a thing. I'll figure it out eventually. But if you're gonna ask us something, probably don't do it through Instagram, because there's a good chance I'll miss it. But we're gonna be taking a look at what every novel must have, and maybe we'll also take a brief look at Dennis Johnson's 3 rules for writing fiction, because I think they're worthwhile. So.
A couple of things real quick. Ashley Pope says, great answers. She says, you do say, hey, I'm Aaron. Do you want to play Magic the Gathering? Dave Fessenden says, did you know that Warren Wiersbe's first book was a book of magic tricks? And Tess wants to correct, because you just said July, and actually Tess and Ashley are both saying, no, it's June.
Oh, geez. Oh, it's been a long day.
And I was too busy reading the notes to catch it. Otherwise, I'd have been the 4th person. So
I really appreciate everybody's publicly correcting me. It helps my heart. So
we're here for you, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there we go. So again, next week, June 13th, or in a couple of weeks, June 13th. Don't forget to ask the author. You can find us at altongansky.com, frankly-my-dear-mojo.com, heatherluby.com, and aarongansky.com. So we do thank you all for listening. And until next week, good writing.